Here's a look at the latest forecast for the center of Tropical Depression 22, soon to become Alpha. You can see the track is toward the northeast initially through tomorrow morning. And then during the day on Saturday, it makes a bend to the left and tracks toward the Texas coast. Now, that white area there is the 3-day cone. And the forecast through 3 days is relatively confident. Beyond 3 days, there's a lot of possibilities. One, it could track slowly up the Texas coast. It could track inland or even back out over the Gulf. And so our confidence really beyond 3 days is especially low as far as this track is concerned. Looking at the cone, the center track will be within that cone about 2/3 of the time. So if you look at that stippled area, that day 4 and 5 position, you can see how uncertain it is. Here's the latest satellite picture of Tropical Depression 22, right there over the central Gulf of Mexico. Getting a little bit better organized, but still not enough to call it a tropical storm. And it is forecast, though, to become a tropical storm, possibly even a hurricane, as it meanders slowly over the Gulf waters. A lot of information here. The color shading gives you an idea of the chances of tropical storm force winds at any point. And what you can take away from this is the highest values are along the South Texas and Mid-Texas coast, but fairly high values all the way up, even including the Upper Texas coast. And as far as the time of arrival, you can see those tropical storm force winds could arrive as early as Sunday evening. So only a few days away, we could be seeing those tropical storm force winds. And one thing I want to point out here is the higher winds will extend pretty far north of the center. We have a high pressure banked into the north as we go through the day, Saturday and Sunday, and that's going to allow fairly high northeast to east winds over a very large area, over the northern Gulf as well. And a little bit of the setup here. Of course, we have our disturbance there over the central Gulf. And as I said, due to that high pressure up to the north, we're going to have a fairly long fetch of moderate to strong east and to east-northeast winds over a long period. This is a slow-moving storm. We're going to be dealing with it for days, unfortunately. But when you have that long fetch and long duration of east and northeast winds, it can pile up quite a bit of water on the coastline. No matter where that low pressure center tracks, we are going to have those winds. So that's why we're relatively confident of some moderate to some minor to moderate coastal flooding, no matter where the storm itself tracks. And so based on this, we need to prepare for high surf, high water levels, and you can see some of the impacts there, bulleted in the lower right. Significant beach erosion, maybe even water on roads, and some water into beach and bay communities. So, and as I said, the coastal flood watch starts Saturday morning. We'll get more into the coastal flood hazard next. Now, what we're showing here are our tide models that were run yesterday. This for Galveston Pleasure Pier. In the upper right, the plot is relative to mean lower low water, which is what a lot of y'all are used to on the coast. And you can see those values right now kind of in that 3-foot area, but increasing up above 4 feet potentially on Saturday, and then maybe even 5 to 6 feet as we get into Sunday into Monday. So those are significant. Once we start to get above 5 feet, we're looking at moderate coastal flooding, even above 4.5. So that's kind of the setup and why we're concerned about coastal flooding with this particular setup. In the lower right, you see the same plot relative to mean higher high water. That's kind of the Weather Service standard. And there we're looking at 3 to 4 feet above mean higher high water. It gives you an idea of the water depth, sort of at the mean high water mark on the beaches. So 3 to 4 feet above ground potentially in those areas. Same data from Freeport. Again, you see quite the same pattern, really some building tides as we go through the day on Saturday and then especially Sunday, getting up into that 4 to 5 foot range potentially above mean lower low water on Sunday. And I should say even beyond Sunday, those tides are going to remain high. They might even creep up higher than what we see Sunday. Depending on the track of that storm, could be significantly higher. If it were to remain fairly strong and move up the coast, that would be kind of our worst case scenario. And again, coastal flood watch is in effect starting Saturday morning and extending through at least Tuesday. Kind of the big picture, the patterns that we're looking at, you can see the analysis here on the map is a tropical storm. It's actually not yet a tropical storm. It's still a tropical depression, 22. But you can see as you go forward in time, you can see that track I had mentioned, and you can kind of infer that from the cone as well. But what we're doing is looking at kind of a daily weather map out the next 7 days. So the most likely scenario, according to the Hurricane Center and the Weather Prediction Center, is for it to actually creep up the Texas coastline, perhaps just offshore. But point here is that this is very uncertain, especially beyond the point of day 4 on this map. Does look like it's going to creep toward the Texas coast. Beyond that, just not clear where it's going to go. But most likely scenario, according to Hurricane Center, is for a slow progression up the coast. And slow-moving tropical systems should immediately draw your mind to flood potential. And indeed, with a slow-moving tropical system, depending on where it tracks, we could be looking at a lot of rain somewhere. Greatest chance for heavy rain and associated flooding would be along the coast, based on the latest best track information. But again, that's very uncertain, especially beyond 3 days. So I wouldn't lock into these numbers and the rainfall patterns here, but it does give you an idea of the potential. So the next 2 or 3 days, most of the rain should be offshore, but you can see it'll gradually creep up from the south into our area as we get into Monday and Tuesday especially, and then Wednesday and Thursday. And then that assumes, of course, that the system does lift north. If it were to stay south or move back out over the Gulf, we wouldn't see this amount of rain. And then this is just kind of what I was saying on the previous slide. The rainfall amounts, very track dependent. Don't lock in on these values yet, but you can see, and you can imagine with a slow moving tropical system, we could be looking at over a foot of rain. We've dealt with storms like that in the past. It's all going to depend on where that motion is as far as the rainfall flooding. So storm surge is sort of an immediate threat, but right after that, we need to be concerned about flooding from heavier rains as we get down the road. Of course, this is going to be a big wave generator. As I mentioned earlier, a prolonged period of pretty strong easterly to northeasterly winds is going to really generate those waves. You can see some of the analyses here showing that area of 15 to 20 foot waves potentially, maybe even higher, kind of working its way up the coast. And so by the time we get later in the weekend, we'll see some of that wave energy coming right into our beaches, leading to that potential for beach erosion. On top of those elevated tides, we would have surf on top of that. So even though the system may or may not track our way, the center of it it's very important to realize these impacts are going to be felt far outside that center track. So just to sum up, the most immediate concern is going to be that a minor to moderate coastal flooding, which could begin as early as this weekend. Coastal flood watch in effect starting Saturday morning, actually, and then it could get up into moderate levels Sunday night or Monday. Beyond Monday, it could go up even further depending on where that storm tracks, which we really don't have a good handle on beyond about 3 days. Also concerned, of course, about heavy rain and flood potential, given this is a slow-moving tropical system, and this is all going to depend on how the system tracks, how close to the coastline, or does it come up the coast at all? Does it stay south, track inland? So there's a lot of question marks as far as that goes for Southeast Texas. Certainly higher likelihoods down the coast where there's a little bit less track uncertainty. We're also looking at gusty winds along the coast, even pretty far removed from where the center is. Now, how high those winds will get will again depend on the strength and track of the system beyond 3 days, which is still a little bit uncertain. But certainly, winds to tropical storm force are a possibility. And as far as the confidence, it's generally a low confidence forecast, although our confidence for this minor to moderate coastal flooding I would term as moderate, a bit higher, because it's less dependent on the details of that tropical system. So that's all I have, kind of just where we stand as of now. We'll do these briefings daily through the weekend, probably at 10:30 again tomorrow.